Welcome to Transformational Pathways, a podcast created by Toastmasters District 46 in the greater New York area, where we share conversations from influencers within the Toastmasters community and people whose lives have positively transformed by walking down the Toastmasters path. Whether you're just getting started in your career, have had recent career changes, or you're navigating different languages, we're here to help you build confidence by discovering new tools, overcoming your fears to find your voice, and engaging in a thriving community. Enjoy today's episode.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Toastmasters District 46 Transformational Pathways podcast. I'm your host, Scott Mason, and walking the pathway with me today is our guest, Adam Cole. Adam is a customer success manager at Slipstream IT, an IT outsourcing and managed solutions company, which does a lot of work for biotech and pharma firms. Adam, there's a lot more to your story than that very short sentence would necessarily imply. We're going to get to it all, too. It is good to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. It's great to be here. Thank you for hosting me tonight.
Thank you. Adam, I love to listen to my guests, and I observe things, and then I ask. People accuse me of being nosy, but I can't help myself. You don't have a New York accent now, do you?
No, not at all.
Well, where did you come from? If you're not from New York, how do you even exist?
That's right. I'm originally from Australia. So I was born...
Where in Australia?
Born and raised in Australia. I was born and raised 60 miles south of Sydney in a steel mill city by the name of Wollongong. And I won't have you try and spell that, but it's a pretty place on the beach. And I grew up there and spent my formative years there before leaving in my early 20s.
What were you like as a little boy?
What was I like as a little boy?
Were you up there giving speeches? Were you in the debate society? Were you doing that sort of thing?
I enjoyed debates, actually. I did enjoy debates. I remember in my last year of primary school being involved in a debate that had me as the third and final speaker, the anchor speaker, so to speak. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was a bit nerve-wracking, but I still enjoyed it. Yeah.
Very nice. Absolutely love it. And you left your hometown and you went to school. Tell us a little bit about your education. By the way, there's Harvard mixed in there.
Sure.
I didn't raise that during the intro, but I'm raising it now. Talk to us about all these degrees and things I saw on your LinkedIn.
Very good. So I went to university in Wollongong. I did an undergraduate degree there and spent 4 years there, and then did a year of university in Sydney, and then joined the real world and got a job with a bank. But a couple of master's degrees later with the University of New South Wales in Canberra. And the Harvard course, I was only there for 6 days. It was a Kennedy School of Government course, and that was it. But it was very nice to be on that campus and enjoy that environment. Yeah.
I bet it was. Eventually, you left Australia. Talk to us a little bit about the circumstances that began your career transformation and ultimately took you here to the United States. They're actually pretty interesting. And by the way, a little birdie told me that there might be some love involved in that story. We haven't talked a lot about love on this show, but I want to hear some stories about love.
That's right. Very good. So I joined the Air Force. I joined the Royal Australian Air Force when I was 24 in 1997, and served in a variety of locations in Australia, in Alice Springs, in Adelaide, and in Canberra. And I found myself for a number of years bouncing between postings in Adelaide and Canberra. But at the end of 2014, I was selected and posted to a position in Washington, D.C. So I moved over to Washington just after Thanksgiving in 2014. So I left what was effectively the start of summer in Australia for a particularly cold and frosty welcome to Washington. But those 3 years were certainly the best 3 years of my career. I really enjoyed them. I was a liaison officer and an assistant defence attaché, so I got to know Washington very well, and I got to know the United States very well as well. It was a fantastic time. But in that time as well, I served in Iraq, and we may talk about that a bit later, but that comes into the story as well.
Absolutely. Before we talk about these deployments, why exactly would anyone leave the glamorous world of banking for the Air Force?
That's right.
Not that there's anything wrong with the Air Force, by the way. I co-host a show with someone who was in the Air Force. But the motives as for that sort of switch, right? The remuneration you're getting at least would be dramatically different. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah, it was funny. My grandfather on my mother's side had been an employee of one of the major banks in Australia for nearly 50 years. So he joined a bank when he was 15 and retired from that bank just before he turned 65. So one side of the family was involved in banking. And the other side of my family, my father's side, my grandfather had served in World War II. He was aircrew in World War II, and he served in the Pacific and Southeast Asia. And I had an uncle who joined the Air Force as well. And as much as I loved Wollongong and the beach and being close to family, I thought the world was a lot bigger than that particular place. So I thought that joining the military might be a good way of seeing Australia. Australia's a big country, and seeing the world as well. The uncle had served in Malaysia. He'd been on a posting over here. He served in St. Louis for 3 years, and I thought it might be a good chance to see other parts of the world beyond that I'd known growing up.
Well, it sounds like you definitely did that. At a minimum, you went to Washington, D.C. and worked there. But you also, as you mentioned briefly, spent some time in Iraq. Tell us, when was that exactly, and what was the nature of your deployment?
So I was an intelligence officer in the Air Force, and I was first deployed to Iraq in August 2003. And I was there for 6 months. So Australian deployments are shorter than most US deployments. So I was in Baghdad on Camp Victory. So there were Saddam Hussein had several palace compounds in Baghdad, and there were two that were very close to the airport. So I was posted to one of those, and it was very surreal because when I got there, most of the Australians were still living in his actual palace building itself. So to walk into that place and see marble and chandeliers was quite extraordinary. It was surreal, and to know who'd lived there at some point as well, because that palace had been bombed. And when you hear it's been bombed, you think terrible devastation. But there was a bomb that hit a service road, which cut all the power and all the water to the palace building, and there was another bomb that landed in his bedroom. So where the Australians slept, if we walked a couple of rooms around, because we're on the top floor, we looked up at the ceiling, you could see a hole where the bomb had come through, and we looked down the floor and see where the bomb went through as well. And I was there when the Transitional Authority paid some Iraqi workers to clear out that bedroom. So to walk in there, or to look in there first of all and see all the wreckage and debris was pretty incredible, knowing who had lived there. And then to see it afterwards, after it cleared out as well, was surreal. But it was a surreal environment. It was a bit strange to get used to at first, but after a while, you became very accustomed to, the sounds of helicopters. You would hear explosions, all manner of things. It was all very normal. Going to dinner with your rifle was a normal occurrence. It was very surreal. But I enjoyed it because it gave me the chance to do my job for real in a real environment. So I served there in 2003, 2004 for 6 months. And I went back in 2005 to cover someone whilst they were on leave. And then went back again in August 2005. I was there for 6 months. So I had a total of 13 months in Baghdad, and then a deployment a couple of years, in 2007 at the UAE. supporting Australia's P3 detachment. But I have great memories of Iraq. Some good, some bad, but it was certainly quite an experience for me, and it certainly shaped the person who I became, that's for sure.
Well, and we're going to talk about that. First of all, I love to talk. Perhaps too much. And one of the upsides of liking to talk as much as I do is that almost nothing shuts you up. And very little leaves me speechless. But going to work in the palace of Saddam Hussein, you describe it with some specificity, but I just want to take that in for a minute. I want to hear a little bit more about this palace, and I think a lot of other people do too. Okay, it's the palace of Saddam Hussein. What does it look like? Paint us a picture, please.
What does it look like? The doors were the biggest doors I'd ever seen on any door frame anywhere in the world. And I don't know how tall these doors were. I never got a measuring tape out, but they would have been at least 20 feet high. And when you walked through these double doors and you looked in, all you could see was marble. And There was a huge chandelier, but there were a series of other chandeliers in that main atrium area. And then he had a couple of these spiral staircases that went up to the second floor and the third floor. And you walked up those. And the funny thing about that was we slept on the third floor, so we slept on the top floor, but there was no running water. We were there, so when I got there initially, it was August, so the temperature was in the 90s, over 100 most days. So you're drinking lots of water. So if you had to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, you had to get up, you made sure you were dressed, and then you walked out to porta potties, the porta johns, which were about 2 or 3 minutes away. But when you walked to them, you walked through this palace to get to them. And I still remember on more than one occasion thinking, who lived here before I turned up? So it was surreal. It was surreal. Yeah. It was very strange. Yeah.
And were there paintings of Saddam still around, or
no, not at all.
Icons or
all
things
gone. So we didn't see anything like that when I was there, and I struggle to think where I don't think I saw pictures of him anywhere in Baghdad either. There might have been murals or frescoes or what have you on some of the roads, but I don't ever recall seeing them. He had a palace in the city, in the green zone, and he had 4 busts of some, I can't remember who the figure was, but it was his face on this particular bust.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember seeing that, and I remember there was one painting in that particular palace of Scud missiles flying into the air, and they had the Iraqi flag on them. So that was interesting. Yeah.
You say that there are good memories and bad memories there, but that they made you into the person you are today. You've got to share some of these memories with us, and you've also got to let us know what exactly you mean when you say they made you into the person that you are today.
I think it gave me confidence to do my job in a real environment and to know that I could do it well.
What exactly was your job, by the way?
So as one of the intelligence staff, I worked with the senior intelligence officer with the J2 in the headquarters to provide him with updates and a good situational awareness on what was happening, and not only in the environment in Baghdad but in Iraq as well, and helped him and the commander, or provided the commander with updates so that they could understand the way that particular conflict was panning out. So it was something I came to enjoy, and it was something that once I got to enjoy it, I knew I could do it well, and I felt very comfortable with it. So being comfortable in that environment, with extremes of weather and not much sleep and threat, and doing a job for real. It felt good. It was not like being when a plumber goes to work, they want to work on real plumbing issues. They don't want to sit in a classroom for the rest of their lives and learn how to unblock a toilet or unplug a sink or something like that. So to do that in that environment, it was rewarding, very rewarding.
What sorts of day-to-day things did you experience? Iraq, you mentioned earlier in passing, like bombings were going on. I think why I'm digging into this is it is so difficult for people to imagine what working in that sort of environment would be like, particularly in the capacity that you have, that even any sort of description of what this was going through would help. And I also want to add, as I'm sure you know, maybe you would disagree with me about this, and please disagree if I'm totally just making it up. But in my opinion, the U.S. media tended to sanitize the situation there and just have it maybe as a snippet with a brief 2-second little piece of something in the news that would come and go. So we were engaged in a war. Bombs were going off. People's lives were at risk. Soldiers were dying. And no one had any idea of what it was like there. Yeah, it's hot, right? But what is it like to be sleeping when it's 100 degrees and there's no air conditioning or running water? Or what is it like to what is it like to walk through the streets of another city in a country where any step you take, I assume, the next thing you know, you and the life of everyone you are talking to could be at risk. To share with us some of that, and I'll just use as an example, because I just have to share this. For instance, on another podcast that I host, I interviewed a man that was an IED dismantler, right? And as he talked about what it was like to drive down these roads and not know whether the person sitting next to him would come back in one piece, that brought all of this home. That made it real. What can make this real for us?
What can make this real for us? That's a good question. It was incredibly hot. It was insanely hot. I heard someone in the media describe it's as hot as hell, and I thought that was most appropriate, particularly in July or in August and September of 2003. It was hot. What's it like to live in an environment where you hear gunfire, you hear explosions, and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
I was never involved in combat, and I take my hat off to those people who did that for their job. Very brave, incredibly brave people. But when you're on a base, it's a very different story. I remember one morning, I worked with other intelligence officers, and one of them had been up and at work early because he was preparing for the update for the morning brief, and he said to me when I walked into the office we occupied, he said, when you come back from breakfast, can you stop in at the operations centre and ask them about the insurgent that's at the front gate that's in the middle of a firefight with the guards? And I said to this guy, I said to Daniel, I said, how quickly do you need this? And he said, just eat your breakfast and get the information and come back. So I went down to the dining facility, and the dining facility then was a series of construction huts which were basically butted up to each other, so very low roof, very thin, and I normally would sit with other Australians and talk with them briefly over breakfast if I was going down there by myself. But on this occasion I thought, I'll just sit by yourself because you've got to get this information and go. So I remember grabbing a bowl of cereal. It was a bowl of Raisin Bran, I remember that much. And I think I was 2 or 3 spoonfuls into the bowl of Raisin Bran, and I heard a crack in the ceiling above me. And what it was one of the rounds from where that insurgent was involved in the firefight down at the front gate with the guards. It went up, the round went up, and it came down and landed came through the roof of the mess, through the dining facility. And when I looked up, because it was the middle of winter and it was cool, there was dew, this little tap of rainwater dew came through the hole where the round had come through. And I thought it was hilarious, absolutely hilarious, because everyone heard the noise. Everyone heard the noise. It made a distinctive sound. And when we go through our training and we do shooting, there are times when we'll exist down where the targets are so we can manually patch the targets for people who are in shooting practice, etc. And that's exactly what it sounded like. But I remember hearing the sound and thinking, that's a rifle shot. And then laughing, and then other Australians who were nearby looked at me and saw me laughing, and then I finished my breakfast and went off, and when I got back,
wow.
Buddy said, what update have you got? And I said, well, I've got an update for you. So it was surreal like that, but there was another occasion, a couple of months before that, or a few months before that, where I was sitting there and it was dark, and I remember hearing 2 mortar rounds being launched or fired not far away, and I'd never been fired up with mortars before, but I'd had seen movies and watched television shows and had heard the sound. But they made a very distinct sound straight away, and then they landed some distance away from the dining facility. But the noise was incredible. There were lots of occurrences like that, more than that I could count, but it just became commonplace, very commonplace.
When it's commonplace, do you get used to it, or is it one of those things where you always are aware that anything could be about to happen?
You got used to it. And I remember going to sleep one night in a pitch black room, and a rocket landed nearby and exploded. And the room went from pitch black to as bright as the midday sun in a flash. And as soon as it was over, I rolled over and went back to sleep. That's how you got used to it. It just was normal.
What?
It was normal.
That was a mic drop. Wow. So, although there was all of this going on, I want to get back to the gossip.
That's right, yes.
That is that in the middle of war, blood, and palace intrigue, there was romance. Or maybe the beginning of a romance? Or maybe the seed for a romance? What happened?
I'd say just an introduction. So I remember meeting, going to dinner one night and sitting with a couple of paratroopers from the 101st Airborne, and there was a group of US Army girls that sat on the same table as I was on, and they had an Australian Army major with them. They made a ruckus, an absolute ruckus. And they drew us into their conversation, but they seemed like a lot of fun. But I stayed in touch with, or developed a friendship with those ladies during that deployment, and there was no funny business that happened on the deployment. They were a lot of fun, right. And they seemed to like Australians because they had met a few of us on that particular deployment. This is all their second deployment to Iraq, so that was very interesting and very intriguing for us as well, because they'd effectively come over for the invasion in 2003, gone back to their home posts, and then come back again. So I thought that was extraordinary. But I stayed in touch with. I met this group of, I think it was 5 or 6 US Army officers, and the 2 of them stayed in touch with me, and we exchanged emails and all that sort of stuff. And then I was posted to Washington at the end of 2014. So this is 9 years later, and still in touch with a couple of those ladies, and they were still serving in the US Army at the time. And one had a promotion party and ceremony in June 2017. So I was 6 months away from returning to Australia, and it was a great party, very nice ceremony. And one of the ladies that was at that particular party was one of those girls who I'd met very briefly in Iraq in 2005. And I remembered her, I obviously remembered all of them because I kept in touch with 2 of them. But I remembered all of them that were there, and, we all said hello to each other, and I went up to this one particular girl, and she was looking particularly pretty that day, and I said, "Do you remember me from Iraq?" And she looked at me, and she said, "No." And then I had to explain who I was.
My heart just hurts.
It does. I had to explain who I was. And she went, I think I remember. But then...
Was she telling the truth or was she just being...
No, I think she was telling the truth. She was telling the truth. But then
Thank goodness.
There was a party later on, and she was sitting on a table, and there was a seat vacant next to her. And I thought, well, there's that pretty girl from the promotion ceremony. I'm going to go up and have a chat with her and see what happens. And she seemed to be intrigued by yours truly, and then started to remember me and remembered meals, with that particular group of people, and even going to mass on a Sunday. But she remembered me, and we exchanged phone numbers, and about a month later we started dating. And it was, I wouldn't say a whirlwind from there, but we certainly, at some point we had a very serious conversation because she knew I was going back to Australia. I never had any plans on staying here. I remember a particularly bleak, cold day in Washington in February 2015, thinking, see as much of this country as you can, because you were here for 3 years and that's it. But someone I took over from in that office in Washington said that, towards the end of your time here, you'll probably meet someone. And I thought it was absolute rubbish. I thought, no, I'm here to do my job, enjoy 3 years of working well and seeing as much of the country. But to say that you'll meet someone that changes your life, in the last 6 months, I thought that was rubbish. But it happened. But but we had a serious conversation. We had a very serious conversation in, I think it was mid-September 2017, and I asked Krisha if she wanted to come to Australia, but she had some pretty significant reasons why she didn't. She wanted to see Australia, but she had some significant reasons for staying here, and I still remember thinking, well, I'm going to have to leave the Air Force, something I love, and start a new life here, but it will be a happy life. But I remember planning and doing a lot of thinking that night on the train from Penn Station back to Washington, D.C. But at the end of the day, it came down to I gave up something I love for someone I love.
Aww. It's a beautiful man. And you ended up in New York because she's a New Yorker.
She's a New Yorker, yes. She's a New Yorker. So she served in the US Army for 6 years, but apart from those 6 years, she's lived here for her entire life. So she's a New Yorker born and bred, and she reminds me of it every now and then. She's the boss. She's definitely the boss.
I like your wife. So we'll talk about that off the camera. Absolutely. For now, let's talk about you're in New York. How did you end up involved with Toastmasters? Come on, you worked for a bank. You were in your high school debate society. You were a confident intelligence officer traveling around the world, sleeping through bombings. You're in Toastmasters.
I'm in Toastmasters. So I first joined Toastmasters in 1993 in Wollongong. Even though I enjoyed that debating experience when I was in primary school, I lacked a lot of self-confidence, and I really needed to improve my ability to communicate and my leadership skills. And I remember someone recommending Toastmasters to me. So I joined a Toastmasters club in Wollongong, which sadly no longer exists. Its name was Colliery's Toastmasters. And
thank you for shouting it out, though.
I was a member of that club from 1993 to 1997, so I finished up just when I joined the Air Force. But I had a lot of fun, and it really helped me develop my communication and leadership skills. I did the old Competent Toastmaster scheme and was awarded the CTM qualification. I competed in the humorous speech contest at club, area and division level, and that was a lot of fun. And I talked about my experiences as a bank teller. So you didn't think you could turn a boring old bank teller job into something that was quite funny, but I managed to do that. So that was great. But I was in Toastmasters for 4 years initially, and then for one of my postings in Adelaide's in the south of the country, I joined Toastmasters again. I thought it was time to polish up those public speaking skills. So I was a member of a club, Quintessence Toastmasters, which is still going very strong, despite the pandemic. I was a member there from 2006 to 2008, and then I left Adelaide for Canberra. And I remember I was working from home here in New York before we were all working from home. Yeah. And I thought, you're limited in your social interactions with who you actually deal with. Mm-hmm. You need to get out and meet people. So I looked for a club here in New York, and I think it was September 2019. And we live in Westchester County, and there are several clubs that are close by. But I picked a club in the Bronx, and the Bronx is about 25 minutes from where we are. So I found Riverdale, Bronx Toastmasters Club Riverdale, and never lived in that area, had nothing to do with that area, but I looked at their website and I thought, okay, I'll give this club a shot and see what they're like. And the first meeting that I went to, which was at the Riverdale Neighbourhood House, it was very friendly, warm bunch, very positive bunch. It had that good Toastmasters feel to it, and I thought, okay, I'll see what this is like on a second meeting. So I went back for a second time, and it still had that lovely warm vibe. But it took a bit of time to join, not because I didn't want to join, but the club was in a bit of peril. So it had a bit of a rough trot there, and it had a club coach appointed, and she was working tirelessly to try and get that club rejuvenated. And I remember talking with the club president, that I told her that I'd been a president of a Toastmasters club previously, and she just flat out said to me, "Do you want to be president next year?" And I said, "Yeah, that'd be great." So this was in early January 2020, before the pandemic kicked in.
Wow!
And I thought, okay, set yourself up and just enjoy this. I started on Pathways and give him my icebreaker, and then the pandemic hit, and the pandemic absolutely flattened that club. So the president stopped coming to meetings when the pandemic hit. The club lost its vice president membership and lost other members as well. So we went from, I think it must have been about 20 members down to 8 to 10 members very quickly. And we're doing our meetings via Zoom. And our first Zoom call, our first Zoom meeting, we had Zoom bombers come in. And the Toastmaster who was running the meeting did a fantastic job with removing those people from the meeting. But it was an incredible experience. But the club was in trouble. But it was a great club. I could feel that it was a good club. There were good people there.
Let's talk for a minute, though, about what all of this means. And I want us to be honest about it. This is Transformational Pathways. It's about transformation. Usually it's been about the transformational pathways that the guests have been on. And we will talk about that with you as a guest. But Toastmasters itself is an organization that is constantly growing and changing. That's one of the beauties of it. This gives us an opportunity to really talk about what that transformation can look like from the inside. So I want us to keep it honest and real, because that's honest and real is where people find power, strength, and inspiration. Not through platitudes, as we were talking about before the show. We both know that. But before we go into that, you cannot tell me that there was not a good story about the Zoom bombers. And by the way, this will be a legacy production. People may be looking at this 5, 10, 15 years from now, and they may not know what a Zoom bomber is. So talk to us a little bit about what a Zoom bomber is, and talk to us a little bit about what on earth happened, because these Zoom bombers, some of them are kind of crazy.
Yes. So we were sitting in the meeting, and this is before Zoom introduced the waiting room feature. And I remember seeing all these names suddenly appear that entered the meeting. And they were strange names. They weren't names that any of us had. We all knew each other's name, or we knew of a guest's name that was going to come along to the meeting that night. And these were strange, like games you would see, or names you'd see for a video game, or Twitter handle, or something like that, something crazy. And so all these Zoom bombers came in, and they just started talking over the top of someone. And they sounded like high school kids, and there was bad language and things that don't normally accord with a Toastmasters meeting. So straight away the Zoom master adjusted the settings and kicked out these Zoom bombers. So they were gone. No one said anything on the call. Everyone that was a member of the club did a fantastic job. Didn't react adversely. Everyone just zipped their lips and let the Zoom bombers say whatever they wanted to say. They were then removed, and then we continued on with the meeting. So it was quite good. I was very impressed. But then at the end of that meeting, we all discovered the particular security features that Zoom has with waiting rooms and all that sort of stuff. So we use those now. We know who's coming to meetings, and if there's a strange name that comes up, which we don't get that often these days, very, very rarely. Once since, and that's it. We call on that person, and if they don't respond, they usually leave of their own volition. But yeah, it was an interesting experience for us. It was a learning experience. Wow. You learn. Toastmasters gives you a chance to learn. Absolutely.
And so we'll talk about that now. You had a club that was rapidly declining, and it was in a period of world history, but particularly here in New York City, that was really, 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 really dark. What was that like as a member or someone that knew he was going to be a president of the club? And how did you even feel knowing that, you liked the feel of this club, but it was in a dangerous enough of a membership situation that a coach was hired to, brought on to work with us?
So it was interesting. And when I look at it in my own personal development as a Toastmaster and as a person, when I first joined Toastmasters as a 20-year-old, very shy, not very confident, and that helped me develop some confidence. Then when I joined again, I don't think I was that involved in Toastmasters. I was a member of a club, but there were other people that were doing things, and I wasn't doing things. But this time, when I joined, I knew I had to do something, and I wanted to do something, not for me, but to help these people. Because the people that I met in those first few meetings in person were nice people. I wanted to help them. I wanted to help the club coach. I had no connection with the area. I wanted to help it. And it was a difficult time because the membership was dropping away. People talked about these things, or this thing called Zoom fatigue. And I had to make those club meetings, we all had to make those club meetings enjoyable, fun. To give people a break from what was happening with the pandemic. In March, April and May were particularly dark times here in New York. But to give people a reprieve was my objective. To give people that space to grow, to be supported, and to discover who they could be. That was my plan. It was not easy, but it was a lot of fun.
And we're going to talk about why it wasn't easy and how you dealt with the difficulty in a minute. But before we move on, there's something that is in what you said a minute ago about your why. That is, you liked the people that were there. You wanted to do something to help them. You wanted to be of service.
Yes.
Talk to me about what that means to you. In the concept or in the context of leadership.
I've always believed in service. Always believed in that notion of service, and always believed in helping others. And if you're in a better position than someone else, then help that person to achieve, help them to succeed, help them to learn, help them to grow, and help them to develop. I've always believed in that. I believed in the troops that I was responsible for when I was an officer. I believed in the officer cadets and midshipmen when I was at the Defence Force Academy. I believed in everyone that I was ever responsible for when I was in the military. I believe in Toastmasters. I believe in the people that are in the clubs that I'm a member of now. And I volunteer at the Intrepid Sea, Air and Space Museum in the city. And I believe in the notion of service that museum is trying to convey to it's visitors and guests. So I've always believed in that. And I believe that with Bronx Toastmasters as well. There were good people there. I could see and understood why they were there, and I wanted to help them. I knew that the military had helped me and had given me that chance to be that confident person, and I knew how to lead. I thought I knew how to lead. And I wanted to do that for Bronx Toastmasters Club and make it a great club. I'd heard it was a great club, and it was celebrating its 20th year that year, and I didn't want to see it collapse. Not under my watch, but I wanted to do my best for that group of people, to give them a break during the pandemic and give them that chance to get to the other side of the pandemic and be better people.
I'm again, you're leaving me speechless, and I think it's because I'm genuinely moved. Adam, the period that you're talking about, March, April, May, it was really dark. I mean, people were dying. Yep. Everything was shut down. People were afraid to leave their houses. We didn't know how we would catch this. Everyone was afraid. Yep. Or people, if they weren't afraid, that was, a lot of the social divisions that were beginning then, or they were beginning to really emerge. And I think why I'm quiet listening to this and why I'm reacting that way is this sense of needing to be there for them, having a vision of what could be for them on the other side. What would you say to me as I react to that?
Well, I knew the pandemic wasn't going to last forever. I knew it was going to finish at some point. And we're still in it at the moment. We don't know when it's going to really end, but I wanted to set those people up for success. I wanted to give them that foundation from which that they could step forth and be better people when this is all over, or even during it, because the one great thing about doing these meetings over Zoom was you actually learnt skills in an environment where you're not going to be fired. If you made a mistake in a Zoom meeting in Toastmasters, you weren't going to be told, pack your bags and send your laptop back, because Toastmasters is all about learning and growing. And I made some great mistakes in that time, and I was really happy to make those mistakes because it showed people, you can be human, you can do this, and you can learn and go on to do a super job. And, it was just, I thought, as difficult as that time was, doing those meetings over Zoom was great to learn and then apply those skills, in our normal work life.
What were some of the tactics that you used to rebuild the club?
So there were a few things. I first of all wanted to lead by example. I had to set a tone for what I wanted to see the club achieve. I set them a vision. I set a vision for what we would achieve for that year. And I set a tone that was always positive and supportive. I thoroughly believed in that. I wanted people to always come to those meetings and know that they were going to leave the meetings extremely happy and glad that they came to those meetings.
Well, with membership going down there, and I hate to interrupt, but I've got to ask this question. Yep. With membership going down, how was morale in the club?
No, it was good. It was initially tricky, but it was the people that were there were good. They were a little bit tired, but we started to get lots and lots of guests in, and there were Sunday afternoons where I'd be on the phone ringing people to ask them or to answer their questions about Toastmasters. So we'd have a lot of guests, and several of those guests became members, which was fantastic. But something else I did on a Sunday afternoon every couple of weeks was I would run what I called a Sunday educational session. It only went for an hour, but I used that hour to give people the chance to practice being Toastmaster, to run through the timer duties, to run through what the grammarian did, to answer any questions they had in Pathways, to answer any questions they had about a particular Pathways project, or speech, or anything that they had coming up. Or I gave an educational on how to do a particular role. That was very helpful because it helped people understand mistakes they could make. I was an area director last year as well. one of my clubs in Midtown asked me to be the general evaluator, and I completely and utterly messed it up in the most spectacular way. But I used that to educate people in a Sunday educational session on what they shouldn't do. So I gave them that chance on a Sunday afternoon just to practice that and freestyle, because the timings in a particular Toastmasters meeting, as you know, are well set, and we don't have that much opportunity to explore with different things or train or practice. But yeah, those Sunday sessions were invaluable. Yeah.
How did you keep people coming back?
I made it fun. I push people gently and in a very positive manner to sign up for speeches and to sign up for meeting roles. I'm a Vice President of Education at the time, and she's now the club president. She did a magnificent job of that. She was always very positive, always very supportive in getting people to sign up for speeches and meeting roles. That was fantastic. But the overall intent was to make the atmosphere of that particular club positive and supportive, so that people could come along and enjoy themselves. And when we got around to the holidays, we had an ugly sweater night, and I think I was one of maybe 2 or 3 that was wearing an ugly sweater, but it was lots of fun. We had themes. We wanted to make it fun and enjoyable. Give people a break. And we did this as well during the election campaign. And I remember specifically saying, no talk about politics during this time, because I want to give you all a break from the election. And we had one meeting where we had an interesting situation, but after that, no politics, none whatsoever throughout November, December, and even January, which was great.
That would have been a huge relief.
Yes.
If someone were to ask you, what were the most significant leadership lessons that you learned through this transition, what would you tell them?
That's an interesting one. I would say it's a combination of my time not only as a club president but also as an area director. Contest season. And
just for people that may not be Toastmasters, explain what an area director is.
An area director is a district leadership position, so you're responsible for several Toastmasters clubs within a specific geographic area. So a Toastmasters club will be led by a president, and that president will be overwatched or perhaps managed by an area director who will be responsible for somewhere between 3 and 5 clubs. So I was area director for 3 clubs in Midtown Manhattan, 3 corporate clubs, and I went to a lot of their meetings last year as well, which was great. Fantastic clubs, wonderful members, really positive, and gave me a lot of motivation and encouragement as well. So I enjoyed meeting with them virtually over Zoom or Google Meet. But the big thing for me was contest season. Contest season is in February, and this year Toastmasters had the international speech and table topics contest. And to organise those contests at club, area and division level was a significant experience in terms of organising people. Because you did this from your own home. You did this wedged into the corner of your bedroom or from the dining room table or from the kitchen or somewhere. You didn't do this. You didn't go and see people. I never met any other Toastmasters until I think it was late July this year. So to do this all virtually was incredible. And I had no experience running a contest. I had been a contestant for the humorous speech contest, but I had no experience as a judge. I had no experience as a timer. And I was learning these things as I was doing them. And that was a steep learning curve. But I also had a lot of support from some very senior and experienced Toastmasters in the district as well, which was fantastic. But that for me was a phenomenal growth period, because you're learning as you're going along. And I remember the area that I was responsible for had a joint area contest with another area in Division C, and I was responsible for setting up the Zoom settings. And for this particular call, I set the Zoom settings, and I think that for audio you can set telephone or both. Yeah. And I set the Zoom settings up at 11:30 at night, one night, half asleep. So I set the Zoom settings for telephone and not for, the computer and the telephone. So when people dialed in, I was getting all these messages on the screen, and also through my phone.
Oh, my.
There's no audio. Why can't I hear anything? What's wrong with the Zoom settings? And I was getting text messages as well, and current district director sent me an email, what's going on? So I had to stop, and I thought, if I kill this connection here and now, is that going to end the booking for this area contest? My division director and other division directors are here. I have the district trio here. This is going to look very bad. I might as well start swimming for Australia right now. So I killed the call, and I went back into the booking, and I changed the booking and reopened the call. And it was like, where have you all been? I've been here all along. Goodness gracious me, what's going on? So we lived to fight another day. We learned a hard lesson, but it was a good lesson. But at the end of the day, and I thought I'd grown, and certainly at the end of contest season, I was contest chair, I was chief judge, I was a judge, a ballot counter, a timer. It was a great experience to meet other people virtually, as ridiculous as that sounds, but that's what we were limited to at the time. But it was a real bonding experience, and I thought it was a great experience for myself. Absolutely.
I will not look back on the pandemic with a sense of missing a plague. Yeah. But I will look back probably, and I bet a lot of people will too, with these sorts of weird, intense, would never have happened but for the pandemic sort of relationships like what you're talking about. Adam, people that are not Toastmasters may have heard our slogan, where leaders are made. But leadership is about more than control or being in charge or being the boss. And one thing that is a part of leadership studies, or the reality of being a leader, often is being the one who is required to pick up the pieces. That's why people that are able to do turnarounds in corporate environments are so highly valued and so well paid. If I were a young executive thinking about joining Toastmasters, what would you tell me about your experience that might persuade me this is something I need to do?
I would say this is the single greatest investment that you can make in yourself, in your life.
Whoa. That's a big statement, Adam. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
You're putting yourself in an environment where you're going to get lots and lots of support, lots of encouragement, lots of positivity. You're going to be given that chance to grow and really learn and develop, and you're going to be encouraged by a lot of great people along the way. It's a real journey. It's not looking at the end goal and thinking, I can't wait to get there. And yes, there is excitement to get to that, but it's those lessons that you learn along the way from others, and that you learn from yourself with a bit of introspection as well. If someone said to me that you'll learn so much in contest season, I thought that was ridiculous, because I'd never wanted to run a contest or develop my leadership skills by doing so. But it was, it's...
I can relate, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm just saying. But that being said, I hear what you're saying, and I want to hear you finish it.
But it is a real, I think it's a great opportunity to invest in yourself in an environment which is going to help you grow quickly, more than a series of CDs or DVDs or whatever. You can listen to a lot of stuff on the internet, but actually encountering people and being encouraged, is going to really help you grow. And certainly that's what last year did for me. That's for sure. And what I was able to see that in several of the members of the clubs that I'm a member of as well, which has been fantastic.
Your commitment to service, to self-improvement, and I have to say, your humility It's beautiful,
Thank
Adam.
you.
If you were to identify a leader and or a speaker you admire more than anyone else, who would those people be? Why?
That's a great question. It is a very great question. And I think people would naturally gravitate towards a politician. And I certainly understand why that would be the case. For me, it's not going to be a politician. In 2011, I was a student at the Australian Command and Staff course, and there was 180 of us on course, and we had the opportunity to listen to a gentleman by the name of Mr. Eddie Jaku. Mr. Jaku only recently passed away. He was an Australian man, or he was a man who was born in Nazi Germany. And he had been through Auschwitz and other concentration camps. He had seen everything that we all know now of the horrors of Auschwitz, in terms of the selections and people being marched off to the gas chambers and the crematorium, and even the selections that Dr. Mengele did. He saw all of that, but he survived that, and he gave us, listen to him on that particular day, a great deal of inspiration and hope, and made us want to be better people and better human beings. I had the chance to meet him again. After that talk, I went to the Jewish Museum in Sydney and took my mother there, just on the off chance that he was going to be there. And he was just an absolute gentleman to meet. Very sad that he passed away recently, but I feel enriched for having met him and having heard his story. And there was another Auschwitz survivor that I met in 2016. He passed away last year, Cantor David Wisner. He was from New Jersey, but a fantastic gentleman, real leaders, because they led us in their understanding of humanity and what it means to be good people, and how to be a better person, how to live a good life. So those are the types of people that I look to for leadership, because they're good human beings.
That answer actually transformed me a bit. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
This has been in a way, not surprisingly, but actually in a different way, quite surprisingly, moving experience, Adam. I want to thank you for that. It's been great having you on the show today.
Thank you for hosting me. It's been fantastic.
Oh, it was a pleasure. And you shared your story. I think a lot of people will really be moved and affected by it. For those of you who are listening or watching, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and leave a review or a comment. And don't forget to follow District 46 on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. If you're new to Toastmasters, check out Toastmasters46.org. That's Toastmasters46.org to learn more about us or visit one of our clubs. I loved your club, Adam.
Thank you.
And I plan on going back one day.
Excellent.
Remember this. Toastmasters is where leaders are made.
Thank you so much for joining us on Transformational Pathways. If you enjoyed today's episode or got anything out of it, please rate, review, and subscribe. And if you're interested in learning more about Toastmasters District 46, check out the link in the show notes below.